The air conditioner hummed softly through the grand Winthrop estate, a constant reminder of the luxury Elena had never known. Her calloused hands, hardened by years of labor, still clutched the cleaning cloth like it was a shield against the scrutinizing eyes that followed her down every marble hallway. The head housekeeper, Doña Margot, led her through the estate with the firm authority of someone accustomed to unshakable order. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor, each step ticking down the seconds Elena had left before her secret might be exposed. "This is the main wing," Margot announced coolly, her voice as sharp as the ice sculptures adorning the corners. "Mr. Winthrop is extremely particular about cleanliness. One mistake, and you're out." Elena gave a small nod, silently memorizing every detail of the space she was expected to keep spotless. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen raindrops, catching the morning light and scattering it into mesmerizing patterns. The walls were covered in imported wallpaper, telling silent stories of wealth and prestige she'd only seen in glossy magazines. "Do you understand everything?" Margot arched, one perfectly drawn brow. "Yes, ma'am," Elena replied softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good. Start with the main sitting room. Mr. Winthrop has an important meeting this afternoon." Left alone in the vast room, Elena began her work with the determination of someone who knew this might be her last chance. Her every movement was precise, almost ceremonial, as she wiped down surfaces with the care others reserved for sacred treasures. Voices echoed down the corridor, snapping her to attention. Two longtime staff members, Chloe and Nadine, entered mid-conversation, stopping abruptly when they saw her. "So this is the new girl," Chloe said, her gaze sweeping over Elena like she was evaluating a display item. Nadine stepped closer, a cruel smile curling her lips. "You know, I did a little digging on you." Elena's heart skipped a beat. The cloth in her hand began to tremble. "Santa Maria shelter," Nadine continued, savoring each word like a poisoned candy. "Abandoned at birth. No family, no documents. Do you really think a girl like you belongs in this house?" The air grew thick and suffocating. Elena stared at the floor, her knuckles white from gripping the cloth. "Not going to defend yourself?" Chloe taunted, stepping in closer. "Or did they not teach you to speak at the orphanage?" Their cruel laughter shattered the silence like shards of glass. Elena shut her eyes, willing back the tears. And then, strong footsteps echoed from the grand staircase, cutting through the tension like a knife. Julian Winthrop, master of the estate, rumored to control half the state, stood at the base of the stairs. His presence was commanding, magnetic. A perfectly tailored suit framed his powerful build, but it was his eyes, steel gray, piercing, unforgiving, that no one could look away from. "What's going on here?" His voice was low and controlled, shaking the very air. Chloe and Nadine instinctively stepped back. "Sir, we were just showing the new girl around." "Or harassing her," he interrupted, voice dropping into dangerous calm. Elena finally raised her head and met Julian's gaze. In that moment, something flickered in those steel eyes. Recognition, understanding, and perhaps something more. "Sir," Nadine began, "we just wanted to make sure she fits in here." "And who gave you the right to decide that?" He stepped down like a predator on the prowl. The room fell into stunned silence. "Miss," he turned to Elena, voice softening unexpectedly. "Elena," she whispered. "Elena Cruz." "Miss Cruz," he said, eyes never leaving hers. "Are these employees bothering you?" Elena felt the weight of the moment. One word, and she could reclaim her dignity. "But, no, sir," she replied gently. "They were just explaining the house rules." Julian studied her for a moment, as if trying to unravel a mystery. "Chloe, Nadine," he said their names like a verdict. "My office, now." The two women paled and scurried upstairs, leaving Elena alone in the sitting room once more. A few minutes later, while polishing a crystal cabinet, Elena heard approaching footsteps. It was Margot. The usual sternness on her face was now touched by something that resembled respect. "Mr. Winthrop has asked to see you in his office." Elena's heart tightened. Maybe she was about to be fired on her very first day, perhaps because she hadn't stood up for herself. Julian Winthrop's office was a solemn space, filled with dark wood and fine leather, with towering bookshelves lined with antique volumes. He was standing by the window, his silhouette illuminated by the soft glow of the afternoon sun. "Miss Cruz," he began, without turning around, "why didn't you speak up against them?" Elena clutched the hem of her plain dress. "Because I need this job, sir." "And that justifies staying silent in the face of humiliation?" "No," she replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "But I've learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than retaliation." Julian turned to face her, his gaze locking onto hers with such intensity it stole her breath. Interesting, a profound philosophy for someone your age. He moved toward the desk. "Where did you learn that?" "At the orphanage," Elena answered honestly. "When you grow up without a family, you realize that yelling only draws attention, and not all attention is good." Julian's expression shifted slightly, like a crack had formed in his composed exterior. "Starting today," he said after a pause, "you'll be assigned to the east wing of the estate. No other staff is permitted to interfere with your work." Elena lifted her head, disbelief flickering across her face. She hadn't asked for special treatment. She hadn't even wanted to be noticed. But under Julian's impassive gaze, she couldn't read a thing. "You want me to clean the library?" she asked. "No," he replied. "I want you to protect it." Before she could ask what he meant, Julian had already turned away, leaving Elena and Chloe standing in a silence that suddenly felt very heavy. The elevator doors closed behind him, but what he left behind wasn't just an order. It was a beginning no one had seen coming. The top floor of the Winthrop building felt like another world, completely detached from the echo of high heels, judgmental glances, and the endless whispering of Manhattan's elite. Elena pushed open the heavy oak door. A warm scent greeted her, part old paper, part aged wood, with the faintest trace of cinnamon. Before her stretched the library, unlike anything she had ever seen. Vaulted ceilings lined with wood, skylights spilling sunlight like liquid honey. Dark wooden shelves brimming with books, some so thick and ancient they looked like they carried the weight of a century's memories. At the center stood a long table, beside it an old armchair draped with a soft wool blanket, as if someone had just been sitting there and might return any moment. Elena inhaled slowly. This wasn't just a room. It was a whisper, a place time had forgotten to pass. As she dusted the corners, her hand brushed against a small desk hidden behind a velvet curtain. Unlike the grandeur around it, this one was humble, with faded edges and a drawer slightly ajar. Inside lay a tattered notebook, its pages yellowed with age, its corners worn soft. She opened to the first page, blank. Something inside her stirred. Elena sat down. For the first time in years, she let the pen touch paper. "Dear Mom, though I've never seen your face, I wonder if you had my eyes. If you ever felt so alone you couldn't bring yourself to smile anymore." The words spilled out like a quiet exhale. The page didn't interrupt. It didn't judge. It simply listened. Julian never entered the library like other people. He didn't knock. He didn't make a sound. He just appeared, quiet as the room itself. Elena never heard his footsteps, but somehow, every afternoon as she cleaned the books high on the shelves, he would settle into the armchair near the window, open a thick volume, and dissolve into silence. They didn't speak, but their silence wasn't heavy. It was gentle, like a breeze slipping through leaves. Each did their work as if the other's presence had always belonged there. One evening, after Elena had left, Julian rose from his chair. The soft glow of the library lights reflected in his steel-gray eyes as he moved toward the small desk behind the velvet curtain. He found the notebook, opened the first page. "I used to think love had a shape, like a tiny silver locket you could hold in your palm. But when it disappeared, I learned that the most important things can't be measured." Julian sat down, turning a few more pages. The handwriting was awkward, unpolished, but carried a weight that was undeniable. In those lines, he didn't just see the childhood of an orphan. He saw himself, The empty spaces, the unanswered questions, the long nights spent in rooms so cold no one ever asked, "Are you okay?" He closed the notebook. He didn't speak, but he knew it then. Elena wasn't just a maid. She was a world. That night, Elena had forgotten her thin scarf in the library. She returned close to 10 p.m., hoping to slip in and out unnoticed. But when she opened the door, she froze. Julian was there, not in his usual armchair, but at the small desk behind the curtain. In his hands was the notebook. Their eyes met. In that instant, there was nothing left to hide. "You read it?" Elena whispered. "Not just read it," Julian said, his voice low like the night wind. "I lived inside every page." Elena took a step back, her face paling with shame. "It's private. Those are things I've never told anyone." "I know," he replied, rising from the chair, "and I had no right. But, Elena, what you wrote moved me in ways I didn't know I could still be moved." She turned away, tears welling in her eyes without permission. But Julian stepped closer, gently. "Please don't be ashamed of your truth. Of all the things you tried to hide, what I admire most is that you still kept your heart." Elena looked at him, really looked. And for the first time, she didn't see a powerful employer. She saw a man, cracked and aching, just like her. "Why do you care?" she asked, voice trembling. "You're not just anything," Julian interrupted. "You're someone. You're the first person who's made me want to tell my story instead of hiding it." The rooftop breeze carried away the noise of New York, leaving them in a small world of bare souls and breathless truths. Julian reached out his hand. "We can write the next chapter, if you want to." The silence between them became suffocating. "I should go," Elena whispered, turning away as if to escape everything. "Don't," his voice followed her, low, urgent. "Don't apologize for being yourself. Don't walk away just because someone's feelings for you might be real." She turned back, eyes filled with doubt. I'm scared this is all just a dream. Scared I'll wake up and be rejected again, be not enough, be forgotten." Julian took a step closer, so close that Elena could feel the warmth radiating from his body, the faint scent of cologne mixed with leather and truth. "You're not a dream, Elena," he said. "You're the first thing that's made me feel alive in years." Then he leaned in, his lips brushing hers, soft as a question, but with the certainty of a man who had finally found the most precious thing in his life. Elena trembled, as if every past hurt was being stirred in a whirlpool. But in his arms, she didn't feel like she was drowning. That kiss wasn't possession, it was a promise. The first stitch in two hearts torn apart by loneliness. When they pulled away, Julian whispered against her forehead, "I don't care about your last name, I don't care about rumors. I care about one thing, that you dared to live, to write, to feel." Elena looked at him, stunned, fragile, but for the first time as if she might believe she was worthy of a love that asked for nothing in return. The next morning, the Winthrop building was no longer as serene as usual. Rumors spread faster than the sunlight spilling through the glass windows. Last night, a security guard had spotted Julian and Elena together on the rooftop. Too close, too familiar. By lunch, the staff kitchen had turned into a stage for whispered cruelty. "She's just a cleaning girl, and now she's assigned to the library," Nadine said, biting into the word library like it was a stolen privilege. "Barely 2 weeks here and she's already shaken the whole place," Chloe scoffed. "She must know what to use to climb so fast." Elena passed by at that moment. She didn't need to hear every word. The stairs, the sudden hush when she entered, they said enough. She picked up her lunch tray and walked out. The stairs to the rooftop felt longer than usual. She sat alone in a tucked-away corner where wild daisies grew between the cracks of stone tiles. For the first time since arriving, she felt like a stranger in the place that had begun to feel like peace. She had believed that with silence and hard work she could survive anything, but she had forgotten one thing. The world doesn't judge only by what you do. It judges by who it thinks you are. She had always noticed the locked door at the end of the north corridor, tucked behind a faded velvet curtain, often bathed in shadow. No one ever mentioned it. Not Margot, not the other maids. It was simply absent from conversation, as if the silence around it was deliberate. Sometimes, as she passed by during her early morning shifts, Elena imagined that something waited behind that door. Not danger, but memory. She had never dared to touch the handle. That afternoon, Elena returned to the library later than usual. The air in the familiar room felt different, as if everything was holding its breath, waiting. On the small writing desk where she usually sat, something was waiting. Her notebook was open, and nestled inside was a folded sheet of thick ivory paper. The handwriting was elegant, sharp, unmistakable. "Elena, I don't know where to begin, so I'll start with the simplest truth. I'm sorry." The letter stretched across the page, every line a confession, not polished, but achingly sincere. Julian admitted to reading her journal, not out of curiosity, but because it was the only place he had felt something real in years. He confessed he had lived too long behind walls of pride, and when he encountered her raw, courageous soul, he didn't know how to do anything but stay and listen. "I've spent my life living up to expectations that were never mine. You're the first person who's made me want to break them." Beneath the letter lay a small silver key, placed neatly on the page, along with one final line: "North rooftop, behind the door I've never shared with anyone. If you're ready to enter a world where you don't have to hide, use this key." Elena held the key in her palm. Her heart raced, not with fear, but with the quiet thrill of being chosen. For the first time, she wasn't being dragged into someone else's life. She was being invited in, by trust, not expectation. She looked out the window. The sky was bathed in soft amber light. Far in the distance, the city's rooftops blinked awake as the evening crept in. She rose to her feet, fingers closing around the key. A door was about to open, and she was ready. The door to the north rooftop clicked open with a soft snap. Not dramatic, not grand, but to Elena, it sounded like another heartbeat awakening. The room beyond was a glass dome wrapped in green vines and lit by gentle lights that felt like moonlight held captive. At its center stood an antique telescope pointed straight at the New York sky, where even among all the noise, dreams still had a place to breathe. Julian was there. No tailored suit, no guarded eyes. Just a man, subtly trembling as she stepped through the doorway. "You came," he said softly. Elena nodded, fingers still curled around the key. "I used to think this room was my hiding place," he said, stepping toward her. "But you turned it into a beginning." She walked to the telescope's side. "Because you showed me I didn't have to shrink to exist in someone else's world." They looked at each other, and for the first time, there were no lines drawn. Julian pulled something from his pocket, a copy of the key she held. "Not to keep you," he said, "but to remind you. This place and this heart will always be yours, if you choose to stay." Elena smiled, a tear tracing silently down her cheek, not from pain, but from release. In a world that always demanded terms, trade-offs, and concessions, she had finally been chosen without condition. And that, perhaps, was the beginning of something stronger than healing, belonging.